Mary, are you online?
Yes, I am.
All right. Give Joel another minute. Heidi there? Okay, we've got a quorum. All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Tuesday, May 16th meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Commissioner Mary Daly will be participating in this meeting via interactive television from 718 Mound Avenue, Mankato, Minnesota 56001, which location is open and accessible to the public during the meeting. Commissioner Heidi Duran will be participating in this meeting via interactive television from her address located at 3625 22nd Avenue South, Moorhead, Minnesota 56560, which location is open and accessible to the public during the meeting. Moorhead Public Service Commission welcomes and encourages customer input on issues listed on the agenda or of general water, electric utility interest, time and commission permitting. Speakers are limited to 3-minute presentations. Customers wishing to address the commission regarding a specific agenda item will be afforded that opportunity during the discussion of that item. Customers wishing to speak on matters not listed on the agenda will be given the opportunity to do so under the heading Customers to be Heard Recognitions. Each person requesting the opportunity to speak is asked to fill out a request to speak form located in the back of the room and presented to the administrative assistant in attendance at the meeting. Any follow-up or feedback will be done by email on anything that cannot be resolved this evening. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by McDougall, seconded by Gilbertson, to approve the meeting's agenda. Gilbertson.
Aye.
McDougall.
Yes.
Daly.
Yes.
Thompson, yes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
A motion by Daly, seconded by Gilbertson, to approve the consent agenda. Discussion? Seeing none. Gilbertson?
Aye.
McDougall?
Yes.
Paulson?
Aye.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Customers to be heard of recognitions, Mr. Schmidt?
No customers in the audience. One quick notice, we do have our survey still going on. So if you know of any neighbors or friends that live in Moorhead that would like to submit a survey, we'd appreciate
Great, so noted. Any old business? Seeing none, move on to reports. City Council, Mr. Gilbertson.
The only thing to report is the city approved the architect for the library community center.
Thank you. Public Service Commission, anybody attend any meetings? Okay. Item C, 8C, General Manager's Report. Mr. Schmidt.
Sure. Lengthy report. Again, it's our first quarter update on strategic update. So I'll let you kind of read through that. Focus more on the matrix at the meeting tonight. Again, we've got yellow, green, and orange on our second year accomplishments. This is year 2, of course, of a 3-year plan. And again, a lot of those are in yellow, so they're ongoing. Some of those will be completed during the second quarter. Some of them take the year to complete as well. We do have a couple of them that are completed and a couple that we haven't started yet. So overall, we're in process on a lot of our second year accomplishments as well too. We've also got the dashboards as well. I'll just give a brief overview on that. The overall first quarter electric division was in line with the budget for purchase power and energy. Outages, of course, were in line as well compared to last year. In summer is our busy season for outages. Lovely squirrels. And weather as well. Other than that, we did meet all of the commission board indices for the first quarter of 2023, and Taylor's actually going to do a review of the 2022 in a little bit here. Water-wise, chemical costs are similar to 22, but they are above average from the 2019 to 2021 average we have. Again, treated million gallons a day of water, that is above average as well. Leaks were a little less than 22 that occurred. Most of those that are occurring are actually in areas that we're actually doing water replacement. Already started. Finance-wise, on the electric side, net position is above budget, common for the first quarter because of cold weather that we're typically dealing with as well. And water is actually slightly above budget as well, too. We did have 3 injuries in the first quarter as well. Other than that, we did have our normal legislative update. That is coming to an end here sooner rather than later, but we'll see how long it takes them. The last item on there, I've got Mark Moylan. I'm going to have him come up and speak about the LIHEAP changes that have been put forward. Mark, I'll let you go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Mark Moylan, in Finance Division Manager. I just want to give an update. The state of Minnesota administers the low-income home energy assistance program, and this year it looks as though some of the amounts that they've been sending out for assistance are lower than last year, and so they've relaxed the requirements and now will allow people to qualify if they are below 60% of the state median income. Moorhead Public Service receives a considerable amount of funding through the program via its customers. Last year at this time, Moorhead Public Service had received about $1.3 million. This year it was down to $918,000, which kind of supports why they relaxed the standards and will allow more people now to qualify. The items in here, it's administered by West Central Minnesota Communities Action for this area, and they are a operator for the Minnesota Department of Commerce. So this will definitely help our customers that are looking for assistance. There's more available. They also increased the crisis availability from $1,200 per year above their standard allotment, and now they can get up to $3,000 in crisis payments. And this will go through September 30th when the program year ends, and then not sure what that'll mean for next year's program, but we usually don't find out about that until late August. So I'll entertain any questions.
I guess that's it, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate it.
General Manager's report.
Okay, and I'd entertain a motion to accept the general manager's report.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Paulson, seconded by McDougall to accept the general manager's report. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Item 8D, the annual reliability performance report.
Sure. I'm going to have Taylor Holt, our project engineer, come up and speak to this. Again, last year was a pretty good year compared to 2021. So I'll let Taylor go at it.
Thank you, Taylor Holt, project engineer. This is an annual report that is required that we produce for the commission to basically explain how we did for reliability for the last year. It was actually quite surprising, the results that we had. Since I started here, this is the best year of reliability that we've had. There's usually been one sort of really big outage that has drastically affected the system, causing all of our stats to be kind of skewed a little bit. But we're probably down about 40% in our outages over the last few years, which could be chalked up to some of the maintenance and strategies that we've been implementing. But at the same time, we got very fortunate with the weather, and we've actually had a reduced number of squirrel outages in a positive trajectory. Hopefully that continues, but I'm not going to keep my hopes up for that. We have 4 indices that we report to you, and we met all of the commission set standards for those. Outside of that, it was an overall really good year, and so far we're on the same trajectory for 2023. Are there any questions from the commission?
Squirrels and weather, are those the 2 factors that we can consider in this drop in
Those were
incidents,
reduced.
expense?
The equipment failures and underground faults have been about consistent for the last 6 or 7 years. There's usually about anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 per year. But we've also been saving money in our budget to take care of those and replace wire and that equipment as soon as they get identified. So that's part of our strategy that we've implemented since I started.
Typically, we provide this report in February roughly, but we've switched to a new reporting system. So we use APPA's or American Public Power's e-reliability tracking system. So we don't see that typically until April. So this is the first opportunity we get that. This is the second year we've actually used it. And actually, if you look through the report, we actually are in the first quartile of pretty much every indices that they have as well too. So we are doing really good compared to other public power entities.
But along with that, if I might add, APPA's reporting system divvies up different ways to evaluate or compare our statistics to other utilities. They include all participants, which we're very fortunate in the small footprint that we have, that it's much easier to make improvements and more cost effective to make improvements in reliability than vast service territories. But they also do break it down to other municipalities and also customer size along with that. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it and compare. And like Travis said, we're on the leading end as far as reliability goes.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thanks. I'd entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by McDougall, seconded by Paulson, to accept the 2022 Annual Reliability Performance Report. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Item 8E, Conservation Improvement Program.
I'll have Taylor come speak to this. Taylor kind of took this over when Dennis Eisenbrown left, our Energy Services Manager. So I'll have Taylor kind of give you the update on 22 and then the plan for 23. Go ahead, Taylor.
So this report and plan is so that we can follow the state statute that requires this SIP program. It's broken down into a few components, mostly just, by the way, the program I've inherited. So the one that the state really focuses on is the low income, we call it a winter weatherization program, but essentially it is a program for low income residents to upgrade some of their appliances to make them more energy efficient, which ultimately reduces our purchase power expense. It reduces the amount of energy in total, but it also helps to allow the customers to spend less of their income on energy. And so it really ends up tackling a lot of issues through just one program. We've continued to work, we've continued to hire that out through our, I'm blanking on the name right now, but we get some help with local appliance dealers to provide those and perform the shipping, and hire out consultants to work with the customers, inspect their properties, and help promote the program. Like I said, we exceeded that dollar value, which is 0.2% of our residential revenue, and we're heading in the right direction in 2023 as well. Along with this program, we work with Missouri River with a rebate program Their entity is called Bright Energy Solutions. Last year, we made a big step forward in getting one of our key accounts to start applying for rebates again. That drastically helped push us towards achieving our goals. The goals set forth are getting to the point of being unachievable because in order to get rebates, the customers have to do capital projects. So in order to reach that goal, we're really dependent on customers spending money rather than our own. Along with that, I think that covers just about everything as far as those items, but the commissioners have any questions on any of these energy efficiency programs?
I think that's it, Taylor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's a good program, the Bright Energy Solutions. I like that program. And the other ones too, but that's particularly good. I entertain a motion to accept that report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Daley, seconded by Gilbertson to accept the report. The 2022 Conservation Improvement Program. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, item number 11, audited financial statements.
Sure. I'll have Mark Moylan, our Finance Division Manager, come up and speak to this one, and I know we've got Eide Bailey Consultants on the webinar to give us the presentation as well. So Mark, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Travis. Good afternoon again. Mark Moylan, Finance Division Manager. At this time, we'd like to present to you and have you consider this item 11 to approve the 22 audited financial statements. On an annual basis, MPS's records, financial records are audited by an outside consultant. In this case, we worked with Eide Bailey, who a contract was entered into to serve as auditor from 2019 through 2023. So they'll have one more year left on the current contract. The audit was overseen by Jamie Fay, who's a partner out of the Mankato office of Eide Bailey. And a lot of the field work was overseen here by Jack Kupich, who is a senior audit associate, and we'd like to thank them for all their work on this process. At this time, rather than give away any spoilers, I'll let Jamie go through her executive summary, which will give you the update on how the audit went and their findings. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jamie. Just indicate next frame when you're ready if you don't have control of the PowerPoint.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, thank you, Mark. Let me know if you can't hear me. Otherwise, I'll just get started and zip through the presentation here. So as Mark said, my name is Jamie Fay. I am an audit partner here with Eide Bailey. I'm out of our Mankato office, but I'm coming at you from Kansas. So I'm staring out the window of downtown Wichita today. So kind of some good adventures here at Eide Bailey where we're headed. So as Mark said, we completed the fiscal year end audit. So we're talking today about December 31st, 2022. And we'll zip through the executive summary. That gives you some colors, some graphs. The financial statements are pretty standards based, so it doesn't give you a lot of historical information in there. So we like to put this together to kind of explain kind of what's in there, what really should draw your attention, and so forth. So if you want to go forward 2 slides, please. So first of all, when you talk about an audit, there's a lot of different words that get thrown around when you hear auditor or audit. I've had a lot of people say different things. When I say I'm an auditor, they think I can see their taxes. They think I'm with the IRS. So I just like to clarify, when we are talking about an audit for MPS, we are talking about coming in and testing a selection of items to make sure that the financial statements are prepared materially accurately in accordance with the standards. The government auditing standards is what we follow. So we talk about the GASB, the government, basically the government reporting standards. That's how we decide if the financial statements are accurate or not. So we are obtaining reasonable assurance, which means we maybe select 40 transactions to pick expenditures from and look at the backup. We maybe recalculate some balances to say, we think it should be this, but it's this, how can we get from one to the other, make sure that that makes sense. So we look at things on a test basis. We do not look at every single transaction, and we do not recalculate everything to the penny. I just like to be really clear with that. At that point, we would just be an MPS employee, so it's a little bit different. We have a lot of conversations with management. We look at some of the big significant numbers that are on the balance sheet, and kind of going through some testing procedures related to those. So you can go to the next slide. So this year we did our planning for the audit from December through February. So that really entailed some preliminary conversations, both externally and internally, figuring out how we're going to test things, what we're going to test. We have done the audit for MPS for a while, so we're very familiar. This is my second year on the audit. And it transitioned to me from someone who I worked with very closely. So I Bailey knows MPS very well, and we kind of have a good handle on where the risk areas are and kind of what we were going to be doing. We did the testing in March, wrapped that up in April, and we issued the report on the 8th of May. So got everything buttoned up and ready to go. So if you go ahead one more slide. So then when we get done with the audit, the big question is, okay, well, what happened? What are our results? So going forward, one more slide. The opinion is what a lot of people want to know. What was our opinion? What did you come up with? MPS received what we call an unmodified opinion, which a lot of people will call a clean opinion. That is what you want. That's what you've gotten in the past. That means that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with US GAAP. So it's prepared in accordance with what it should be. Things are in there like they should be. That is our opinion on the financial statements. So making sure that it's free from material misstatements. So with the opinion, that is great news. You got a clean, unmodified opinion. The follow-up question that I get on the next slide is, what kind of findings did you have? Tell us what we need to know. And you had no findings on the financial statements or the Minnesota legal compliance, which again is great news. So those two categories really are on the financial statements. Are there any findings saying, did we miss something? Do we have a segregation of duties issue? Did you have to post a lot of journal entries? There's no findings there, so nothing to note there. The second area that sometimes we have findings in is called Minnesota legal compliance. So since you are a government in Minnesota, the state auditor has put together a series of checklists that tells us what we need to look at in accordance with state statutes. Minnesota state statutes are very specific on certain things, particularly things like when you bid projects, where the cash is held for the entity, those types of things. So we did a number of different procedures to test those, and we got, again, no findings in that area either, which is great news. So that's kind of the overall. Now we'll look at a few numbers. So if you go to the next slide, the first kind of number graph that we want to look at is cash and investments. And this is really for overall for MPS, what does it look like? So if you go to the next slide, this is our first color graph. So really looking at the last 10 years, what does cash and investments look like for MPS? And you can see the last couple of years, it's been pretty steady, and it's been kind of going up since 2015. You can see the breakout between operating cash, bond reserves, and investments in there. This is not meant to say you should be at a certain dollar amount, really just a, hey, this is what it looks like. It's got the electric and the water funds both in there, and it's got all that cash in that graph. So then breaking it down a little bit, if you go to the next slide, operating cash is that piece of cash that really is used for general operations. So we have this broken out. You can see the different colors for the water fund and the electric fund, and then the total is right at the top. So you can see really from 2019 to 22, so the last 4 years, it's been pretty steady. A little bit of ebb and flow, which you would expect, but it's been pretty steady where it's at. Now, these numbers can really vary depending on, did you get a big receivable payment at the end of the year? Do you have a big payable to pay at the end of the year? So this isn't necessarily indicative to how the entity is doing. It's just to show you what your operating cash on hand looks like, because having cash on hand is very important. If you go to the next slide, it kind of lists the reasons for that. So you want to have cash on hand to get that favorable bond rating. If you're going to go out for some debt to do a project, you can produce some investment income, and then kind of most importantly, it offers a little bit of a cushion, because if you, obviously, if you've been through the last few years, you know that anything can happen, and having that cushion is very important to make sure that you have the cash on hand to be able to make it through if there is a lapse in payments, or if there's a downslide in, payables, or an upslide in receivables. So if you go to the next slide, one way that we look at cash is days cash on hand. So this represents the number of days that you can pay your operating expenses with your unrestricted cash currently on hand. So at the end of 2022, You can see the electric fund was 366 days and the water fund was 585 days. So what that means is at the end of the year, that's how many days of cash on hand you have for those operating expenses. Now, it's important to note that that is operating items. So if there's some things that are kind of big and non-operating, that's outside of that. But that's just a number to show you kind of where you've been. The last 2021 and 2022 are pretty consistent. And you can see there's some ebbs and flows here. Throughout our procedures, we do look at, differences between last year to this year and get explanations if things change significantly. And as we do that, if there was something we weren't able to get an explanation for, we would have that reported. So there was nothing that we couldn't figure out. Yep, something changed, but it makes sense. So if you go to the next slide, now this is going to talk about operations, and we're going to look at a few different metrics as far as the electric and the water fund. So the next slide is looking at the electric fund. The look and feel of this is really the operating revenues, operating expenses, and then the net of those two, which is operating income, and then if there is a transfer out of that fund. So you can see it's actually pretty consistent really for this 10-year mark. It does increase kind of over time a little bit with inflation, but from 21 to 22, there's almost no change here, which is kind of what we would expect to see really with those operating items for the electric fund. And then the next slide looks at the margins. So those numbers are big when you talk about, 45 million and 35 million. Those are big numbers, but how does that really look? So margins is one way to look at that. Really, if you take the operating income and the net margin, so operating income over operating revenues, and then the net margin is net income over operating revenues. So really just a way of looking at what does it really cost to operate this business. That's really what these margins are. So the operating margin, you can see it actually held steady at 32.8% for 21 and 22. And then the net margin, which is that little bit smaller one, just decreased a little bit. Again, we do some recalculations on these numbers. We take, different things into account as far as what changed. Was there usage changes? Were there rate changes? And there wasn't anything we couldn't get explanations for on that. So that is the electric fund margins. Now the next slide is going to look at the water fund. This is going to be the exact same look and feel as the other slides, but this is for the water fund. So looking again at operating revenues, expenses, and then the operating income, which is the net, and then that transfer out. So there was a little bit of an uptick in those operating expenses. You can see, again, nothing that wasn't unexpected, but something that's noted in there. The next slide is, again, the margins. This is for the water fund. So looking at the margins for operating margin and net margin. Once again, a little bit of a fluctuation, but nothing that we didn't get explanations for. You can see it kind of ebbs and flows kind of over the last 10 years. It's really not super consistent. So it does fluctuate a little bit, just depending on what's going on in the economy each year. So the next slide is looking at the debt service coverage. So what the debt service coverage does is it says, okay, we have a certain amount of cash flow that we need to pay our debt service. So and interest and principal on our payments or on our debt. So a ratio of 1 would mean you have $1 of cash flow available for every dollar of debt payment. For 2022, that ratio was 3.73. So essentially you have $3.73 for every dollar of debt payments. Now, we're not saying that 1-to-1 ratio is what you're wanting. That's just a kind of a benchmark to show you what it really means. So $3.73 of cash flow for every dollar of long-term debt payment for principal and interest. You can see it reduced a little bit from 21 to 22. These numbers can ebb and flow a lot depending on where you're at in the debt cycle. So if you take out new debt or if you pay off debt, these can be significantly affected. Or if you get a big cash influx, that can be affected. So that's just to show you kind of where you're at. Actually, if you look back about 10 years, you're pretty consistent with where you were 10 years ago. So it kind of decreases and then it jumps back up. And with that, that is the last metric I have. The next slide is questions. So if anyone has a question, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you so much. Questions?
I would just like
Not
to say,
a question,
Oh.
just a quick comment. Jamie, thank you for explaining that very well. And hello from Mankato, by the way,
Yeah, I heard that. You're where I should be.
right? But I think that your explanation of the fluctuations as far as what's a normal pattern or what we've seen, I appreciate that it was in English that this non-math person could understand, and that was very good. Thank you. And
Yes.
Franny thanks you too.
Yes, of course. I'm happy to. I talk about this stuff all day long, and I love to bring it to people who don't look at it every day like I do. And I would just like to say a big shout out to Mark and his team. The audit is fairly seamless on our side, just like it has been for years and years. So just big shout out to them for their hard work and helping us out to get it done. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Last chance? Yes.
I just want to say thanks to Katie, Jerry, and Mark as well. They do a fantastic job on this.
Absolutely.
Make my life easy.
Yeah, I was going to second that. I wanted to make sure that Jerry and Katie both got mentioned because they do a lot of the heavy lifting on this, get the reports and requests filled in a timely manner so that they can have the data that they need so they can continue on with their audit. So wanted to make sure that they express our appreciation for their work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. If there's no further questions, then we need to move on to approving this audit.
Move to approve.
Okay, I
Second.
have a motion by Daly, seconded by Duran to approve the audited financial statements. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Gilbertson,
Aye.
McDougall,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Daly,
Yes.
Duran,
Yes.
Thompson, yes. Thanks, Mark and team. Item number 12, summer voluntary water restrictions.
Sure. I'll have Mark Pritchard come up. He's our water plant manager. Again, we do this on an annual basis, and it's that time of year again where there's no more snow on the ground. So
Sure.
we got to, for now, we'll have to start thinking about voluntary water restrictions. Mark, I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, Travis. Mark Pritchard, Water Plant Manager. As Travis had mentioned, this is an annual item that we do each year. Every year since 1990, the Commission has implemented conservation efforts in the form of these voluntary watering restrictions, specifically for lawn watering, for a few different purposes. Number one, of course, is to conserve water, and then, as well as that, reduce peak demands at the water treatment plant, and be good stewards of our water resources. There's also an extra benefit that we get from an operations perspective, because if we are able to shave a little bit off the top of our peak demands, it also helps out with our daily chemical costs as well. So what does this mean for the average customer, the average residential customer? Well, it's primarily based on street address. So if your home address ends in an even number, we encourage water use for things like watering lawns, washing your vehicles, or other large water uses to match even numbered calendar days. Likewise, if you have an odd numbered address, we encourage that use to take place on odd numbered calendar days. So it splits it up a little bit so that we're not having heavy use every single day. The main reason why we talk about lawn watering in these restrictions is because that is the largest non-essential use that we have within our customer base. So there are a few exemptions based off of this voluntary schedule. Things such as gardens, flowers, newly planted trees and shrubs, and new sod or hydroseeded lawns. We do have those exempt because they, of course, need water to become established. So based off of the history that we have going back to 1990, starting in 2013, the Commission also approved a conservation rate structure for our water use in the summertime. It's based off of the average customer's use from November through May, and then we add 150% of that value as the new summertime demand. If a given customer exceeds that 150% average flow from wintertime, there is a higher premium that they pay for water. So it's, again, another way that we encourage conservation on a day-to-day basis at the individual level within our customer base. So with that, there are a few things that MPS recommends as easy tips that people can implement. Again, the biggest one is for lawn watering. If we can implement folks cutting their grass to about 2.5 to 3 inches, it helps shade the root system, and it also prevents quick evaporation as you spray in the early morning hours or in the evening. If you go in the middle of the noontime sun, most of it's going to be evaporated off, so FYI there. But there's also a wealth of information online that have creative hints, tips, and tricks for people to conserve water, and we do have some of those on our website as well as on our social media posts. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mark? I have a question. Do you get complaints? I mean, is there anybody who calls in and says, you know, my neighbor keeps watering their lawn? I mean, I'm conserving, but my neighbor's not. I mean, is there any kind of complaint?
We do get some. Every year we get a couple where people are concerned that people are using too much. That's just kind of par for the course.
Yeah.
We did get quite a few during 2021 when we had our mandatory watering restrictions during that flash drought that we experienced. We did have quite a few phone calls, but after we, investigated to see what was going on a little bit, all it takes is a little reminder, and people have been excellent about helping us out with these conservation efforts. So overall, people are really receptive to it.
Sure, great. That's wonderful. I just was curious. Thanks for answering my question. Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Mark? I entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Dick Gilbertson, seconded by, I'm going to pick one, Paulson. Seconded, right?
I did.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't pull it out of the air, right? To approve the summer voluntary water restrictions, any discussion? Seeing none. Gilbertson?
Aye.
McDougall?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Duran?
Yep.
Daly?
Yes.
Thompson? Yes. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. There's no closed meeting this evening. Upcoming meetings, June 6th and June, probably the 27th. June 27th. Yep. Okay, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair?
Oh, I'm
I have
sorry.
one more thing. I forgot to do this as recognitions. We have a new admin assistant in the house tonight, so Lisa Norset is going to be taking over from Mandy as Mandy takes over the records management coordinator position, so she's getting some training in, so you'll be seeing her at her meetings going forward.
Great, I met Lisa at the beginning of the
Yep.
night, day, afternoon. So, anyway, nice to meet you again. Thank you. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by McDougall, seconded by Daly to adjourn this evening's meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming. Have a nice evening.
Y'all have a good evening too.
All right.